I wanted to start asking you because you were a lot talking about like introducing new probably economies of time, shared or common spaces, also to like emphasize kind of a responsibility towards a broader political or socio-cultural situation in your like local environments, but also global environments in the end, like also naming probably a bit this great context of neoliberal, you know, like dictatorship in a way, or which is a process, but you know. And yeah, I would like to start to talk about this issue of responsibility in terms of time, space, location. Like how much are we responsible to create these heterotopic environments, and how is it possible to do this?
Okay, I suppose you know, I think that somehow we all come from so many different contexts, and what works in one context absolutely does not work in another. And one of the things that I would say, like in Singapore, you know, this idea of the fact that you are only useful as an artist if you are cultural capital, right? That means that you are cultural capital that the city can use, and you are. It's, you know, you're not important if you are making small actions, you know, with 100 people. But once you can start to influence 100,000 people, then like film or TV, you are then someone that they have to watch, both harness and also control. I think that this is something which is completely different. For example, let's say from a situation perhaps. You know, we talked about earlier of like, you know, should it be a single curator, or should it be opened to many different curators coming in to maximize and also democratize the space? And I think that in a festival like what I'm doing in Singapore, I think it's absolutely important at this stage to actually refuse this kind of committee decision making, which has actually happened over the last 37 years, which was the way in which they flatten out any kind of very specific action, which is that one person recommends something and then it just, once it goes down the line, it becomes flattened out to become, in the end, totally, I think, non-articulated. So this whole question of a single curator or curating by, you know, opening the field, I think that this is, of course, is important, but at a certain moment, it's a question of what's the urgency. So for me, I think that quite a lot of what we're talking about here, I would like to say, I think it really has to be filtered through a more specific lens of your specific city, and not even that, but maybe your specific community that you're working in. But this whole thing, which is becoming very dangerous, which is the sexiness of money and art, right? Which is why, you know, contemporary visual art, which is why curation is very important in contemporary visual art, for example. And all this is really related to the conversation of the market, which at the moment perhaps the performing arts is not really producing on a large level, let's say. So that's the first thing. I think that what I would like to say is that we are working in quite specific contexts, and what works in each city. And when I say works, I mean that I'm talking about articulation and making articulate as well as making transparent. That's what for me works. Works is not so much about success in terms of economy.
I'm wondering a bit, because that's also an issue of control, you know, like controlling these situations, and and at the same time, there is this like aim also from you when I see your program to do like community-specific work, and but that's also forms that, you know, like regional marketing instruments are using more and more. And I think like the people of us who come here from Ruhr area, they know how these industrialization of cultural expressions work. You know, like there's really, it's largely going on here also this. Yeah, like instrumentalization, as you described it, probably in another scale, or you know, like the context is different, but the strategies are are similar in a way. And I wondered a bit, because you were introducing also this term of attitude, and I was also reading this a bit out of your, you know, like of your words, Rolf, that this is like a crucial, you know, like a crucial quality of how you mean the things that you are doing, and to make them into something, because the formats in a way are very similar at the moment. How are you dealing with this? You know, like probably I'm also thinking about things that you did. Rolf was really investigating much into working with communities, and how do you see this? You know, like that these formats are probably copied in a way to achieve something like a regional marketing. Do you experience things like this? Is it happening in South America also, or?
In 1994, so we are talking really about a long time ago, we made a project with our company Mapa Teatro in one of the main prison of Bogota. I don't know if she's still here. No, she's not anymore. I've met here. Are you here? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. She remembered that she was in Bogota at the time when we where we did this project. This project was not planned to be in a jail. We were just making a research about a text by Heiner Müller who was arrived to our hands without I don't know how, and it's Oratio. The Oratio? I think that's the name. It's 68 text, a very small text about the rewriting of the Oratio and Curiatio from Brecht, and then from rewriting of Tito Liviu's story. And the question there was, if you kill someone, you can be a hero for a certain community, but you are a murderer for another community. So with that question, how is to be a hero? What does it mean to be a hero? But at the same time, a murderer. And so with this question, we went, this is the reason why we went to this prison. And this is how we start the project. Every project starts with a question, not with a theme, which for me also in this conversation was something important, because I think it's different to have a theme than a question. A theme is not always a question. A question has probably a theme or many themes. So for me that was something important to discuss here, the question. I think there are many questions in the work I have seen, and just to tell that we started to investigate inside the prison with the inmates of the prison about this question. And of course, we didn't want to sit and make an interview as we were social workers or sociologists or no, we wanted to be as doing what we do as artists who meet this a very heterogeneous community of people. They're in jail, but it's a heterogeneous community. And we started to make what it was called theater, because we needed to have a common space where to work. And when they had the word theater, they said, oh, yeah, we can make a comedy, or this, what they knew about theater. So a group of them came to us because it could reduce also the time of being in jail. So that was interesting also. And that was a way of seducing, first of all, the group of inmates. But when we started with these questions, they said that we're not going to stage a comedy, or what is my role, and where is the text? And so we showed the text of Heine Müller, and they started to read and said, what is this? This is not a piece of theater. And we say, well, no, it is not a piece of theater, but how could we do this as a piece of theater? And we were making all the questions that we were making to ourselves. I mean, because we didn't know how to stage this. We were very interested by the questions inside the text, but we were not sure about how to do this. So we started with them, and thanks to them, we also could find a way. And at the end, something which was supposed to be just a period of research became a real project for a piece. And so we abandoned the idea of taking out this information, this very rich information, as all these researchers do when they go to these spatial places, and to renounce to the actors we had outside, and to say, well, no, stay here. We're going to stay here, and we're going to find out how to do this with these actors, non-actors. And we started to work. And instead of being there for 3 months, we stayed there for 1 year. And every afternoon, during 1 year, we were there rehearsing, which is not the appropriate word, but meeting them and working and trying to do many things in order not to get them bored with this heavy text. But little by little we found that some stories, some personal stories could fit, could be inside also the text, and this became a very big matter, no? Material, no? For the work. And the time, you were talking about time before, and so I'm going to put together the two questions. Time and space became suddenly a very interesting and unpredictable place to develop, to think, to create, to rethink our role inside, our role as not just as artists, but as citizens. We didn't know this world at all before, so it was for us a very, very strong experience. And at a certain point we decided, okay, this has to be shown outside. This cannot remain inside. If we want to break now, we have to go outside. And we did everything against everybody to obtain the possibility of going out with the inmates into a professional theater at the time where the performances normally run, and not in a special programming for them. And then finally to be in the festival, where you have seen that, in the Festival of Bogota, where they accepted because we were working with a vulnerable community. And that was a good thing, no? To show that also there was an inclusion of a community inside. So you see, from both sides there was another perspective, but we could be outside in the festival, even if they said they are not actors, of course, but they are acting. And we were excluded from a prize, that a very important prize that UNESCO was giving that year to the plays, because they were not considered as actors. But they were enacting, I mean, they were there, no, as actors. So this possibility of creating the spaces and times, different models of time and space and of sharing, of that has absolutely been for us something that has changed the way we have been working afterwards. So I think that one experience necessarily leads you and puts you in another landscape, you know, that can be very important for what your work becomes.
I think that this idea of producing work today in neoliberal societies and neoliberal funding agencies is a question of disguise, and a question of like maybe what was happening in the former East and in continuing socialist and communist countries, of how to disguise your work. And this idea of a disguise, which we all know about what happened in the former East when they would do productions about Shakespeare, but of course it was talking about their local context. And the question of having to become economically disguised, right? This question of that you are economically useful. And then in that way, you enter the arena and you have this conversation. I think that for me, it's a very complex situation of how do you actually appropriate and be able to discuss, to open the arena up beyond what the authorities want. And what the authorities want is for you to be economically viable and economically an economic force, as opposed to before where you're just a political force, right? An ideological force. And I think that one of the things about the question for me is how do we get beyond the binary of artists and authorities, right? Because, and by bringing in the question of the audience, which actually then breaks up the binary. But the audience is also the market, so that it's a very it's a complicated space which has happened because neoliberal economies are really working in a very different way from former ideological contexts, let's say, or systems.
But also audiences are shaped by the forms that are presented. I mean, we have a huge repertory, cultural repertory, now becoming kind of global also repertory through this very globalized system of circulation and how the theater is moving all around the world. So, but inside, as you say, I think there is a very vital space where to invent, you know, these strategies, you know, to escape.
And I think it's important to, there are some strategies that I would choose not to adopt, like let's say indoctrination of the audience. How do you actually then kind of create a kind of a space for tenderness, a space for vulnerability, a space for empathy. I think these are all becoming very, very important qualities in theatre today, or in the arts, which is very different from, I think, the economic thrust of hard dollars and cents. Right?
But it is also interesting with this space become a space of friction, where the question mark that the performance makes to the audience, and in that state where you have to decide or to find your own place and to find where and how to see these and how to react to this what you have seen, which is something very, very difficult, very rare also, because of course we are all becoming a little bit homogeneous, so we are very familiar, I would say too familiar to what we see. And this is what I found interesting in this relationship between, in the uncanny, this always to bring something that makes you reflect. What is this? Do I like this or not? Or do I immediately reject what I have in front or beside me? You know, what is this? This question I find very, very important. And also when you can bring this to not just to the audiences, but also inside your own work, you know, and the work of everybody. I mean, in terms of how your subjectivity it's really working, you know, and not just consuming, which would be for me an important difference, no?
But I think, that this should be something like a crucial curatorial challenge, no? Like to really ask about the frames and not degrade them as frames, but saying that's the situations that we are inviting in and how to set up these situations apart from just choosing the right work to present it, and you know, like just to have this mode of reaction, but more asking oneself how to, you know, like how to install places of interaction or of, you know, like of building constellations, which is set also into the spectator, you know, like, because I feel a bit that there is kind of or it was a bit of a question mark also the recent days, like how to get beyond this architecture of program work, you know, like to say we have these productions there and then we try to create something like a familiar atmosphere, but I think that this, you know, like that takes it not serious enough that it is about having a familiar atmosphere, but I think these spaces in between, you know, like these gaps which connect as a consciousness also or as an unconscious, that your reception, that probably it would be interesting to investigate a bit more about how to be sharp in describing these you know, like these gaps, or because I don't know if you I think you are working a bit on this, no? Also challenging a bit this economies of festivals, saying we don't have this core time, but we have.
I think in the end, as a curator, it's a question of what you want to protect. Right? What do you feel is absolute, when we talk about urgencies, what do you think is absolutely essential to protect in your context? And I think that one of the things for me was that I decided that I have to protect the open and the pre-festival of ideas, because in a way, in this space where the government cannot say that, oh, we're not interested in education, we're not interested in ideas, they have to keep this space. But at the same time, so how do I protect this space means that I might have to say, okay, let's bring the arts more to the doorsteps of communities, and we do that in a way which is, it's almost like finding a very precise mechanism to deal with each issue. So, okay, you want the arts to go to the housing estates, then it's not about the open. Let's keep the open as a space where we have ideas, then we bring some kind of other radicality into those spaces. So I think that it's almost, I mean, it's not so much about the fortress, but in a way they're all kind of inverse of each other, right? But what do we have to keep as curators as a space where you feel that this is absolutely necessary to hold on to other things you might be able to give away, let's say, and I think that that's what's happened in our society in the 21st century. There are daily battles which are not immediately visible, but they are huge contestations. There are huge repercussions once you give something up. And those of us who are working in contexts where we have to discuss with city council something or federal government something, you know what I'm talking about. There are these moments once you let go of something, it's going to tumble down that slope. And this is very important, I think, the sense of finding more precise mechanisms and actually to hold on to certain things, I think.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if this should not be something like a large critique on presentation and show body, you know? Because I felt that in the last days there was also the sense of saying we get a bit away from this aim to present things, more into this thing of doing things together. And like, how does this shift, you know, like how can you do this and how can you be responsible for the structures that you are leading then. And we were talking a lot about festivals, and I think it's also really important to set this into a relation with the production centers and asking about what's the difference between these two, you know, like Modi also of curating or of setting up structures and shared context, but also like where is the border probably not so existing anymore. I've been thinking about a colleague of mine from Slovenia, from Maribor, from Nagreb, Petra Hazaben, and she decided she had a large festival, pretty for this, you know, like pretty large festival structure, and she decided to say, you know, like it's not worth holding on this festival principle in the way to say we have this time slot where we have to push out as much as we can, you know, like nobody is benefiting from it because nothing is really growing together, or you know, like the artists cannot really investigate in spaces, they cannot get in touch with an audience really, but they would just show something and go away again. And that's, for me, that's really quite also, you know, like when you were talking, saying one has to decide on one's own how much time you take to set up certain phenomena. And that's, for me, it's a question also for festivals, like how much can we stretch probably these time frames that they have, like naturally, and then go away from presentation more into kind of fields of productions which are open to reception, but then probably, you know, like float away. Also, I don't know what you think as main.
No, I was thinking about Keng's tactics to keep within the same platform of a festival, idea of festival, these two very different models or spaces of work, and I really think this is a very, very intelligent and very interesting tactic, no, to reopen in another time, in other spaces with other people. I find this is an answer to this kind of how to struggle, no, with the experimentation, how to keep it alive, how to really do it without any kind of demand from the outside, saying is it rentable or is it financially, how many people were there, and I think this is a very good example, no?
But I think that it's all quite time specific. I mean, meaning that they are all processes, and I wouldn't say that these are necessarily the solutions or these solutions. But then at a certain time, there is a kind of an action that you have to take, and after a while, it becomes some other action that you have to take. I think that's what's really interesting, that we go round and round and round, but history never really repeats itself, and there are different needs at different times, I think.
But when you were giving your speech, you were saying that this open, that it probably would also have something like a time after the festival, so that it's kind of doing. What did you mean by this? Like, what does this mean?
I mean, I think that at this moment where in a sense that perhaps theory and critique can have a different relationship from the time that maybe in Foucault's time, or that I just believe that there's a humanizing force, and that's what's been discussed a lot in New York in particular, about humanizing theory, you know, and that they're no longer abstract, but they are really relevant, and I think that it's when I say that, I feel like that there is a time when something is a right strategy, but it changes again after a while. And maybe we have all got to go back to the spectacle as curators at some point. Now perhaps this is dead, but perhaps in 10 years' time it's about that the spectacle becomes political again.
Yeah, so, but then it's really like this thing of awareness, no, and to put yourself every time again in this complex relation field that reality is, or probably it's a bit banal, but
yeah. And I think that this but what is important, what is interesting is that the festival time and space is, as Bakhtin says, a carnivalesque time, right? So this is that old, kind of like some people say that, oh, it's an old idea, but I think that it is really an important time when audiences are really willing to do something else. So that's a time when politically you can do a lot, I think.
Okay, so we didn't have any questions from the audience now. I hope it. Is there something really urgent? Because before closing, I think we should do this. No, everybody's cold. Yeah, so then thank you a lot.
Thank you so much.